this is just an update on where we are on the Investec roadmap with the open API and our programmable banking strategy. I think before I go into the roadmap, I told Ben maybe we should just rewind quickly and go back to like, what's the point in all of this? Like, why did we actually go down this path and do the programmable cards and open APIs? And it comes back to this statement. So this was on a slide we presented and on the merge, I think it was 2020, might be 2019. I'm lost time with COVID. Sorry, Ben, I'm not sure.
2019.
Anyway, and the point of this was to really to say, how do we really practically enable developers to get access to things that can make their lives better? Like, you know, and because we're a bank, we understood that that was probably the best thing we could give you access to. How do we give you access to your financial information? How do we give you access to automate some of the stuff you do? Okay, so this is the core of what we've been driving. And I think when we get to the roadmap, you can move on. So to understand also the roadmap, I think I'm just going to give you a bit of a brief of how we got here. So we initially launched just programmable banking with a root and with what was the root engine behind it. So focused purely on card. The community very quickly gave us feedback that although that was great, but they would love to have access to some APIs as well. So just the card alone wasn't as useful as also just having APIs to supplement it. So the next phase was then to go and stick in the APIs, both of it in the private client space. So we initially launched this with the aim of looking at developers, at the jockeys themselves, the software developers, and making their lives easier and exposing stuff to them. I think this project has been full of learnings as we went on. As we got to the point where we onboarded a couple of businesses and we saw some of the software that was being produced by the community, we started to think that there potentially could be more value in giving this type of solution to a business than to an individual. And I'll tell you why. An individual, you have access to your own accounts and you can only do so much. Like with a business, you obviously have access to employees, you can give them cards. There's many more options in there that you can use to come to different solutions. And we found a couple of interesting use cases that came along and we've been working on them in the business space. So for the last year, you'll see that Q2 2020 to Q2 2021, I think our main focus has been trying to take all the learnings that we took from the private client API and card launch and apply that to in a business context. I'll give you lots of examples why it just doesn't make sense. Like if you connect to our API as a business, as it stands now, you're still connecting as a private client historically. So if you wanted to give one of your devs access to go collect the transactions and do some stuff for you, you'll actually have to give him your Investec credentials, which is just dodgy. So like we're working on mechanisms now, which basically lets you log on to Investec online. It's almost there, these things. And then you could basically go and generate API keys, set them a certain type of grants and scopes, and then issue those keys to developers to connect to the API with limited access to what they can do. So you can start, like, I don't know, creating a login for your finance team or a login for your dev team, and they can have different levels of access and stuff. The business accounts can be quite complex. You could have 10 businesses on one login, and they only want you to see 3. So it can get quite hairy over time. Okay, so a big part of our focus was converting it from being a me collecting my own data to me collecting the data as a developer to a business, because we believe there's some value, and as the business themselves to collecting their own data and then doing stuff with it. I just put that little golden block there. I think those are 2 of the big community asks we haven't forgotten about. We're still fighting the tooth and nail to get them up. One is the currencies in the transactions you're getting back. I know they currently you're getting it all back in ZAR from the API call. I think there's some businesses that have really asked us that we put the currency that initial transaction was made into those transactions, because you want to know, like, is this guy spending in dollars, rands, whatever. It's a bit hard to see it now. And my main bugbear is that non-unique identifier. Like, there's no way to uniquely identify a transaction. And I know the communities come up with some amazing creative solutions to fix it themselves, but like, I still think that's a failure on our part. It's quite a complex thing actually behind the scenes. There's multiple backend systems that we're aggregating. So it's not like you just have one database and I expose the key. Like, I have to go and do some fancy work, and we're getting there slowly. Another thing would be the pending transaction. So sometimes you swipe your card, the transaction doesn't go through. That depending on the payment mechanism, it could take a while for the payment to show up in your transaction history as like completed. For example, when you swipe your card, the transaction only officially goes through the next day because you have a day to dispute the card transaction. So you could have it reversed in the meantime. So some of those pending transactions aren't in the API, and we're busy looking at that. So the big takeaway up to Q2 2021 was, we migrated from being very much focused on the developer and unlocking potential at the individual to seeing that developers actually form part of a business, part of an ecosystem, and actually opening up that ecosystem is probably more valuable in the long run. Like the primary use case for the APIs and programmable banking seem to be around spend management tools, like PFM tools, budgets, things like that. And like we didn't want to just get stuck on having a cool budgeting tool. We wanted to like expose more stuff so people can play it more. Having said that, we're basically approaching the end of this business enablement phase for all of it. For Q3, we're going to go back and look at some of the big things that were missing in the last 2 years of this project. One being a single code repo. Now, I don't know, like if you have one card, you won't notice it because you go in, you update your one card, you hit save, and the code goes through. Imagine if you're a business and you issue 200 cards, and we have that now. It's actually quite a horrible user experience to go in and try and update the code on 200 cards, like to the point where basically people are sending us code and we're doing it manually behind the scenes. So that front-end user interface is not optimal for a business type of setup. You need a way to manage large amount of cards potentially with the same code. So the code is basically connected, one piece of code to one card. We're breaking it up to saying, let's have pieces of code and you could publish that to multiple cards, or something similar to that. That just makes more sense when you start to scale the solution. And all of these things were just learnings. Like we started this thing not knowing what the hell we're going to do. And I think this has all been an amazing journey and learning. And the community was amazing in giving us all of this feedback so we can know how to improve these products as we go forward. The next one would be the API webhooks. So a lot of the solutions we saw what they were doing is actually just putting in a piece of JavaScript to do a call out to a third-party app like a Google Cloud thing. And actually doing most of the code there. So I started to wonder, is it worth our time to invest more in the editor itself, or would it just be more valuable to expose to webhooks and let you do whatever you need to do on those webhooks? It also, as part of that, enables us to add other transactions, not just card stuff. So we could say, I don't know, there's an event that triggers when money hits your account through any mechanism, not just card swipes. We could trigger a webhook and you could start building stuff on there. So I think that's quite exciting. There's a lot of events that happen in your financial life that we could expose. I think that we'll have some really cool functions once we get access to them. And then the third one is our dev portal. I don't know if you've seen our dev portal. It looks like something I wrote when I was 17 in high school. Like your front end skills here look like something similar to that. It's like, it was a bit of a hack job. We put it together when we started the private client API. We never really updated, but we're gonna rebuild it now in a nice professional manner. Make it easy for all of you to get access to the documents, the API endpoints, how things work, how to onboard yourself, all of those things. So we're hoping that will make a much better dev experience and not like be so hacky as it is right now. So it makes sense. Just stop me if you have any questions or anything else. So basically what we're doing here is just building on the stuff we saw that was missing from our initial launch. So just Q4, there's the three-legged OAuth open banking thing. Open banking is basically the concept in a nutshell in the UK of how do you expose as a bank, how do you give third parties access to your bank clients' data? So if I wanted to give, I don't know, let's go with Xero my data. How do I give Xero my banking data with Xero access to my banking data? Because we built it initially with a private client in focus, you could only get your own data back. So we had somebody, I can't remember who, that wanted to build the app. He built a cool app and said, can I give this app to my grandmother? She's also an Investec client. She wants to use the same app. Like I think it was some PFM type of tool. And we couldn't because the grandmother would have to enroll for programmable banking, which is just a fail. So what three-legged OAuth provides you is the ability to actually onboard non-programmable banking clients into the open API by them actually giving consent that Investec can share their credentials on. So it's a fairly standard pattern. It's been implemented for PSD2 in the UK. You can just go Google how it works. A lot of these payment sites like Take a Lot, and then they use something similar where they redirect you to the company's website. You put in your credentials thing. Adam, you mentioned that some of the screen scrapers hold your credentials. This is how you get past it. So basically what happens here is instead of asking you to type username and password onto their website, they redirect you to our website. You put in your username and password in Investec's website, and we issue them with a token, and they use that token to connect forward. So there's no chance of them ever compromising your data. So I think that's gonna, it sounds a bit techy and nerdy, but I think what that will allow is somebody to go build an app and publish it to other Investec clients that aren't in programmable banking and start getting value out of that. So it will open up the use base quite a bit, I believe. And then just last, in like next year, I'm not sure if it's next year, I just put 2022 above. We're fighting this one every day. It might be earlier, it might be later. It's payments, and we're looking at transfers, beneficiary payments, and maybe once-off payments, and then virtual cards. I think with the demand from the community has been such a large volume that we're actually getting quite a bit of traction internally. We're getting people to approve virtual cards. So I don't want to promise anything yet, but we're getting there. I think virtual cards with programmable banking together, for me, sounds like an absolutely amazing thing where you could spin up a card, define its behavior, use it, and then destroy it instantly afterwards. Like I can imagine there must be amazing use cases out there that we can do with that. So that's my dream, to get virtual cards and programmable banking connected, and let's see what people can do with those two together. And then obviously access to payments, getting your transactions and things, that's useful, but the real values probably comes where you start the movement of money between accounts or the movement of money to third parties, things like that. There's little things happening in the middle, but I don't want to like put a slide full of crap here that like just confused everybody. So I think hopefully this gives you a feel for the big things we're working on, how it will affect the program of work going forward. For example, when we get to the end of Q2, our business capabilities of programmable banking will be quite solid. When we get to the end of Q3, we will, the front end will probably, I'm hoping I can actually get rid of the front end, like the editor in Investec Online, and we all just expose APIs with webhooks and you get access to stuff and do whatever you want. Obviously the dev portal revamp, and then later towards the year, trying to open it up to more people and more functionality that would be useful. It's a very small team that we have, as we always mention. So I've been very impressed with my team, how much they've done with the number of people and the scope of work we have, but we're getting there. I've been very pleased with our progression so far, although it feels quite slow. Doing this in a bank is not easy. Like there's so much bureaucracy some days you have to go through, but I think we're making really good progress.
Awesome. Thanks for putting this together, Wayne. It's really great to like see it and kind of comprehend, you know, what is the reality. From a community perspective, like the corporate stuff isn't probably directly impactful on an individual, unless you want to go and add value to a corporate, then it's like massively impactful. If you work in a corporate or you want to propose like your solution to a corporate. So like Budgie, for instance, you might think like, oh, well, corporate API and card doesn't mean much, but it actually might mean quite a bit to the Budgie project, because now you can take Budgie and you can go to a corporate, especially a corporate with an Investec account, and you can be like, we've got this solution, it's going to work on your corporate like platform.
Exactly. You could aggregate all of the spend costs.
Ways
I'm not
do
sure
you
if a
think
corporate
this is actually...
Sorry, Ben. I thought you stopped talking.
Well, go ahead. I mean, you had a cool idea, so maybe.
Yeah, like you could just aggregate all the corporates' credit cards and give them analysis of their spend in the business itself. Like, so it's not as big as what you think, but it's the same value, just in a microcosm. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think when we launched the community, we were very focused on like what features can we give community members to do cool things with their own bank accounts. But really, the value lies in, I think, as a community member, like what value can I create for businesses or for individuals on scale. And it seems like the Investec Connect idea, where you're giving your app to all the Investec individual clients, is maybe one, like it's to the left of that arrow, to the right of that arrow there, because that's a little bit more crazy. So this is like a bit of a sideways turn, but it's reality firstly, which is awesome. And thanks for putting it up so that we can see it and think about it as a community. And then it's actually also very exciting, and maybe it's like actually more exciting in a way than giving Investec clients, I think, because there's like a lot of value to be unlocked and a lot of impact on the world to be done in corporates. Nick, for instance, showed me an example of a card which you can get, I think in Switzerland or Denmark or something, and it tells you your carbon footprint as you spend. So you could, for instance, take the Budgie solution, give it to a corporate, and get cross-reference transactions with merchants and do like a carbon footprinting of transactions and generate like the carbon footprint of the spend of a corporate, for instance, and that could generate a score for them in terms of their impact on the environment based on what their employees purchase and which companies their employees are purchasing from, which services they're using. So that's like, it's really quite cool, I think. Is there anything else from the corporates, like moving the services onto the corporate platform, that you think will benefit the community, other than opening corporate up to the, as like a channel for the community to develop things in like a more tech sense?
I think the reality is you're not going to make money with your own bank account. Like, that's just the truth of it. Like, you only can do so much with your own money before like you run out of ideas. So what you need access to is more people. You need to scale this thing. Like, if you really want to build a solution, make money, you need scale. And when we started, it wasn't clear to us. I think now it's very clear to me that to get this right, you need to be able to plug more stuff into it and scale. Like, you can't just do it with one card. You need like 100 cards to really, you'd like go and create your own virtual card type of setup, give it to 1,000 clients and start a business like that. So I think there's more opportunity in a development at scale than in just being gimmicky. And I wanted to keep this quite real from the start, like in how much you can do with your own bank account. You need other people to plug into something similar to the budget app to actually start extracting the value. The value is limited when it's just you, I believe. And if we can get people access to do stuff in corporates, and corporates have lots of employees and lots of clients, that gives us a bigger footprint into the market to actually have an impact with the things you're building. Like, if you like,
as far as I understand, you're also developing. As far as I understand, you're also developing a few features from programmable cards, like listing cards and updating code to multiple cards, that kind of stuff, that will come back from the corporate rollout into the private bank rollout, so that you'll also have those features on private bank. So there 100%. Are a few things coming to the community.
Like the corporate endpoints, I don't know, you all probably use the private client endpoints. It's quite limited, like you get transactions, accounts, whatever. The corporate one obviously has more stuff in there, and with more data, you have more power. So like there'll definitely be more richer endpoints in the business side. And like, as you mentioned, Ben, all the work we're doing in the corporate just gets inherited by the private client. So they mutually feed each other, basically. Like we're busy looking at exposing basically all of the card functionality through the Aperture Gateway, for example. Like, why do you need the front end? Just upload your code from wherever you are, for example. And I think that'll be quite useful for a business, because then they can start managing their code in that single code repo example, but also for an individual. And then you don't have to log into Investec online, go in there, paste your JavaScript, simulate, hit save, all of that stuff. So you can, it's like starts to become a really hardened interface that you can really build some cool solutions on. This was all
you got a question?
Yeah, I just want to say, you guys are talking about stuff that's really interesting, but you're also very much focused on one direction of data information, of data flow. And Wayne, you actually mentioned it at some point, because we've discussed it many times over the course of the last year, is being able to programmatically trigger movement of cash. And I think that would be an absolute game changer. The ability for a client, or even if it's a business client using three-legged OAuth and controlling a bunch of accounts, but for a client to be able to set up systems which can make transfers automatically, I think that is an absolute game changer in terms of not just what your impact that you can have is just enormous with that. Like, we don't even know what we don't even know, we can't even imagine what we could do with a system like that.
No, it's incredibly powerful. I'm on the same page. Like no matter what gimmicky stuff people come up with, you have to get back to reality of what's the most impactful thing we can do right now. And that is expose payments. That's the view I have. It's like, it will have the biggest impact individually for members of the community, but also in the business context of how I can start building new solutions of moving money between accounts, different banks potentially, like things like that. It's really, I think there's an incredible amount of value in there. But we're a bank, we have to be quite careful about obviously how we approach this. So once I get through the 600 risk people, I think we're gonna have something amazing.
Cool. Thank you, Wayne. I really appreciate your time on this one.